Hey, and we're back on schedule. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're back to the regularly scheduled weekly update, with this being the last bit of May and then first kind of week of June. And back on track. I was sick last weekend and so didn't have a chance to film, and so did it a little bit late. So I don't have as much stuff to update, but I tried to kick my reading into gear so I at least would have some updates for you. So first thing to mention is Curse of the Mist Wraiths. So I am only 18% into this, which is not crazy far. It's a pretty long book. I've been taking this slow because I have honestly really been enjoying it. I thought it was going to take me longer to get used to the writing style, because it is pretty unique. It's very dense and complex, and the narrative structure is also very unique. But I've really been enjoying it. It's just also, it's wordy, so it takes a bit to read, and the chapters tend to be really long and sometimes have subsections, so it takes some going. This is definitely something I'm going to be working on finishing, but I'm also not hurrying because I'm enjoying it. And it's nice when you've got your really complex read to put some kind of shorter things in there in general as well. So still working on that. I mentioned I had just barely started this one, which is the first Blood of Cain, which is by Michael and Roman Neville. And this would be, I feel like, a really strong example of you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, or its formatting, I guess. But so this one I was really worried about, and this was sent to me by the author, but I was worried because I do not like any of the design of this at all. The photo itself is actually blurry, like it was blown up, and as I flip to a normal page, the formatting is just atrocious in this. So I will be providing that feedback to the author, because I really think with some changes they can make this look a lot more professional. The thing I was shocked with, though, is there were virtually no actual errors in the text, and I was expecting it to be riddled. But no, the editing was incredibly good in this. I came across maybe one thing that stood out to me, which, reading traditionally published books, that's not uncommon to have one or two small errors. So I was very, very impressed with that. And this is well written. It's definitely different from my normal kind of read, and I wasn't still entirely sure what it was going to be about when I talked about it before in my last update. But this is following Michael, who is a son of Cain, as in biblical Cain, who basically was made into a vampire when he drank the blood of Abel, who he slayed. And it sets up basically a world where there are other types of undead, and Michael is going against his father Cain, as well as his brother Matthias, and just fighting evil, basically. And even though he's also the technically the undead vampire kind of thing, it's his mission to fight. And so it kind of sets up for the big good versus evil thing, but the story more so follows a kind of smaller segment of that, although it does feel like it's picking up, and the direction it's going is going to be a bigger, larger scale type good versus evil thing in the next entries. It does mention the second entry at the end of this one, so there's definitely going to be more. As far as the prose and the writing style, I thought it was pretty solid. The weird thing is it's a first person POV, and the style of narration sometimes was a little bit annoying to me. It fit with the character, and it is explained why it is the way that it is, but it tended to get kind of rambly, which once again fits the character, and so I think it was for the most part an intentional choice, but kind of rambly, sometimes repeating things. But overall, it wasn't anything that was too much of an annoyance. This, like I said, the spacing is insane in this, so despite the fact that the book technically has 438 pages, this is maybe a 200-page book. So it read much, much faster than the size would have deemed. So it wasn't something that, if this was a much longer book, it might have annoyed me more, but it didn't really here. The only other thing that stood out is there were some really specific rules set up for different types of undead, how you kill them, what their weaknesses are, and they seemed to be ignored when the plot worked better if it was ignored, and then went back into effect when it worked better for the plot. So that I definitely felt like was a flaw in how that part was handled. But it could just be that maybe the rules aren't as black and white as was stated. That's kind of a theme throughout here where we don't know how reliable this narrator actually is. Kind of from their own mention, they may not be the most reliable, and there's some kind of mentions about how, you know, the person writing it's never going to tell you the whole thing. They tend to sugarcoat things. So I think, like I said, a lot of the interesting narrative choices I think were very much intentional. So this was it. This was a solid book. It just definitely needs a complete overhaul for design and formatting for it as well. So hopefully that's something that the author can work on updating for future things. If you're into kind of like the undead vampire kind of thing, this definitely I think would be something that's worth checking out for you. It's not something I normally read, and I still thought it was pretty solid. It does feel kind of like not necessarily like fantasy, but if you've seen like movies about you know, like the vampire, like the undead who's in the modern world, it kind of has that feel, but it's specifically trying to go a little bit of a different path too. There's lots of reference to, like, you know, it's not like that doesn't mention the actual movies, but it's not like this or like you see in the movies, that kind of thing. So it's something in that vein, but going on a different path. And then so I also finished, actually just earlier today, We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis Taylor, and this was not at all what I was expecting. I commented in my last update that I was expecting a lot more humor early on, and then I came to realize, like, this is not at all a comedy. It's just a, you know, a fairly serious sci-fi novel. It just happens to have, like, you know, a lot of like nerdy references and whatnot, like references to sci-fi movies and TV and just other kind of stuff like that. And it's involving a person basically who their consciousness is uploaded into like a drone, and then there are lots of copies of them, hence, you know, We Are Legion, We Are Bob, and the whole Bobiverse in general. So there's lots of different like versions, and there's some banter, so there are some times where it has a light tone, but I mean, like, overall this is like a pretty serious sci-fi novel, and I thought it was good. It did work pretty well, and it did a lot of interesting things with just general exploration, but I mean, this deals with like changes in governments, world wars, like possible like extermination of species, and like traveling to different galaxies and places in space, looking at different planets, lots of space exploration. It does a lot, and I thought it did it pretty well. I will say, so I did this specifically for Ray Porter, the narrator, and I think doing this immediately after Project Hail Mary, which I just absolutely loved, probably was not actually the best, because I kept comparing this to it, and I didn't want to, I tried really hard not to, because I didn't want to compare it unfavorably, because I definitely liked Project Hail Mary a lot more. And this was really good in its own right, and it was pretty different, even though they do go to a system that they go to in Project Hail Mary, so that made me laugh. At it, just that was still mentioned, which, I mean, it's a real, like, system, you know, in space, so it makes sense that it would still be mentioned. But this did a lot. It talked about a lot of serious topics while just having more of like a witty narration, more so than necessarily like outright humor. So between the title and things I've heard, I was expecting like oddball, zany humor, and it really isn't this. This is, I think, a really solid sci-fi novel, and it's something where I've been reading more sci-fi lately. This year I've tried some, and I tried some more last year too, and so I've been working on trying more. And I think if you're a sci-fi fan in general, especially if you like, you know, having kind of some of those references in there, this worked pretty well, and was set up really well. The only thing is, at the very beginning, it's set up basically that in the future the like fundamentalist conservatives took over and created a faith-based national government in what used to be the United States, and that was a little too real. It was a little too real for me, but otherwise, it like I said, it was handled really well, and I thought it was a really solid novel, and I did enjoy it. So once I finished that, I did start, and I finished that earlier today, so I haven't gotten very far. But then I did start on the Fires of Heaven on audio. I have the physical book above me. Let's just grab it. Why not? We won't put a picture up. I forgot to grab it because I've been doing all these on audio. But Fires of Heaven, continuing the Great Wheel of Time reread. It's not too late to jump in. We even did have somebody who had read the first 4 books previously and is just jumping in for here. If you want to do that at any point and jump in, we're happy to answer any questions. But a lot of stuff happens in this book, so I'm really excited. I'm like still on chapter 1. I got through the prologue and I'm on chapter 1, so not super far yet. Much further to go, but I'm always excited for the rereads because they're so much fun. And the other thing I've just barely started on the old Kindle is my e-arc for In the Shadow of Whitening by Brian McClellan. And this I got an e-arc. It was I got pre-approved for. The publisher sent me a message basically asking if I wanted to review it. And I'd heard about this book for a while. I still have not read the Powder Mage, either the first or second trilogies. I have the first trilogy, so I will eventually. This is something totally different, and I'd remembered hearing about it. The premise was interesting, so I thought, sure, I will give this a shot. And so far, I've only read the prologue of this one also, but it does set up the magic system is related to glass, and like people who can control glass. There's these different types of glass that like give certain abilities, but pretty early on establishing that it has a cost. And then I know like the overall premise is supposed to be like the magical resources are dwindling, so probably the like certain types of glass can't be found anymore. But the prologue setup, which is pretty interesting, is the main character who was leaving an army, had a win, and was like, we're going to be really nice and spare you, but then something happens and an entire town ends up just getting destroyed. And he takes responsibility, even though he didn't know it was going to happen because he was the one in charge. And it seems like maybe he's kind of like in a self-imposed exile when chapter 1 starts. So intriguing prologue. The magic system sounds interesting so far, and I'm very interested to get to know more about this. I started this now because I realized that originally I planned to have my review of this go out Friday, this coming Friday, and I haven't read the book yet because I read Daughter of Redlanter, which is next Friday, before I read this. And so I'm like, I should probably read it so I could try to stick with my schedule. So let's see if I finish in time. If not, I'll have a different review coming out then going from there. And so that is really what I am, what I read and what I am still currently reading for this week. So like I said, not a ton of updates, even though it had some short things in there. I worked on finishing those to give you some sort of update. But yeah, I'm hoping to still continue to pick up the pace and get some more reading in done. And hey, if you are curious as to any sort of like list that I'm actually choosing my random books from, I made a big collection of all of the books that I've thought about reading or that I'd like to get to at some point while doing the mood reading. And so Wednesday will be a video showcasing all of my might be read books for the near future, the next several months, and we'll see if I end up sticking to that at all. But you can check that out coming up in a couple of days if you're interested there. But that's all I have for this video. Make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to chat books, whether these books, other books, any books, or really anything at all. It is a lot of fun and we would love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.